I wanted to thank my dear Talmud Jason for asking me to give this shir. We want to talk today about one of the very most important things, and that is your Mazal, your destiny. First of all, what does Mazal mean? Are we just like robots? Can you change your Mazal, your luck, your destiny? And how can you change it? And, the end of the class goes on to the question that perplexed and bothered Moshe Rabbeinu and bothers all of us. Why does Sadiq, the righteous, have to suffer so much, and the Risha'im, the evil, prosper? So today's shiur is based on Rav Dessler's approach, which is also a Kabbalistic approach. Michtav Meliyahu, volume 4, page 98 to 100. So Rav Dessler brings from the Radak, the great commentator on Nevi'im. He says that the literal, what does first of all Mazal mean, right? So we first understand what a Mazal means, what it doesn't mean, how you change it, how you can change it, and then why we have some righteous people that have a tremendously wonderful Mazal, right? They both are blessed in this world and the next world. Some Sadiqim, they have a miserable life in this world, right? So he says, the Radak explains that Mazal literally means come from nozel, flowing, which already in volume 2, Rabbi Dessler explained, Mazal essentially means this. It's a heavenly shefa, showering of blessing that comes from the heavens, from our Father, God Almighty. And Mazal, practically speaking, for you and me means your luck is the tools and the environment that Hashem puts you in, right? Nothing is chance. The most important thing to understand as a Jew, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, that every single aspect of who our parents are, which city we were born, whether we were destined to be Baalei Teshuvah, is all calculated to the hair. You understand? So the tools and the environment of your specific life, that is a gift from God that you have to reveal, and the manifestation of God's glory, which means every Jew is a soldier of God and has a special mission that no other person in the world could do. So according to your mission, God will give you a certain amount of wealth, health, and the environment for you to strive and thrive and reveal God's glory, that only that spark, that beautiful light that only your soul can bring out that manifestation of God's glory. Now, because ultimately you also have to understand, always two things go on. The Ramchal talks about this. It's Klal Yisrael, the nation of Israel, has a macro general goal, and then each Yachid, right? It's like an army, right? Each person has his own specific role and goal, and then there's the goal of the whole nation as a whole. But now the question, so that's what Mazal basically means: the tools and the environment that you're setting in to get to your mission in life. Now the question is, can we change our luck? Okay, a loose translation is like when a baby is born, we say Mazal Tov, which means we hope that this child will able to. What we're essentially saying there is, unfortunately, too many times people don't fulfill their mission. You know that. And it's the Lag BaOmer in a few days. Literally, we're the 31st day of the Omer. We're 2 nights away. So it's appropriate to talk about Reb Shimon Bar Yochai and the sort of the reincarnation. That, a lot of people, unfortunately, that specific mission they had, they're lazy or, because there is a devil there that puts a roadblock that you shouldn't make out your mission. You shouldn't fulfill your mission. And they have to become reincarnated. The soul has to be recycled to get to the mission. So now the question is, through your free will. Can you change your destiny? That's why when the kid is born, we say Mazal Tov. You should have a good Mazal, which basically we're blessing the kid that you should fulfill your mission, right? The tools that Hashem give you, be like a bulldozer, like my father, Zechron Lebracha. Don't let the Satan get in your way. Do what you need to do. So this seems to be a machloket in the Gemara on the surface, but later we're going to see Tosfot says it's not a machloket. But there's a whole Talmudic page dedicated to Mazal. That's the Gemara in Shabbat, the Talmud Bavli, page 156a, Daf Kuf Nun Vav. The Gemara says that Rabbi Hanania says Mazal Machkim, Mazal Ma'ashir. Depending on which astrology time you're born, because a lot of the times there is some truth to the specific time and date that you're born, the month, and the middle of the month, the end of the month, the beginning of the month. Depending on that, Rabbi Hanania says that's going to dictate how wealthy you're going to be and how wise you're going to be, right?
And the day of the week.
Yeah, and the day of the week. It's a whole Gemara there. There's a whole daf of Gemara. And he says, Yesh Mazal Yisrael. Jews are also under the confines of Mazal. Then you have the famous Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, Ein Mazal Yisrael. And Rav also, right? There's two people, Abaye Verava, Rav Ushmuel, Rabbi Yochanan Resh Lakish. Almost every page of Gemara you have their name. So it happens to be that Rav also backs up Rabbi Yochanan, and his opinion is Ein Mazal Yisrael, which means yes, depending on when you're born. Exactly like Mr. Shaul said, the day and the day of the week and the date, the beginning, end, middle of the month, and the specific month, it's gonna play a role on your destiny, what your capabilities are, what your potential is. But Rashi explains through prayer and good deeds, and the most powerful of all good deeds is Torah learning, right? And giving tzedakah, and the Yerushalmi says Meshane Makom, Meshane Mazal, sometimes through having to move, you can change it and better your Mazal, right? That's what Rashi explains it. Now it seems that there's another Gemara in Moed Katan, and those that are able, please look this up because it's a fascinating subject. Moed Katan, Talmud Bavli, page 28, says Rava seems to hold like Rabbi Hanania, because Rava says, Beneh, how many children you have. Chayeh, how long you're going to live. Umezoneh, how wealthy you're going to be. Lav bezechutai talya milta. It's not, doesn't have to do with how much tzaddik and how much merit you have. Ela b'mazalat talya milta. It depends on your mazel, which means just because there's a tzaddik like Rabbi Yochanan, 10 of his boys died. Rabbi Yochanan himself, you know that? He had to bury 10 of his children. So he says, don't think that Chas v'shalom Rabbi Yochanan wasn't a big tzaddik, right? Or Rabbi Akiva wasn't a big tzaddik because 24,000 of his spiritual children died in this time. His Talmidim, right? Parenthetically, since we're on Lag BaOmer subject, I want to talk about that for a second. The Ramam Mipano says, why are we so happy on Lag BaOmer? Everybody died. So what how can we fathomly be happy on Lag BaOmer? There were no more students. Rabbi Akiva had to go to 24,000 funerals. He didn't have did Hashem even leave one extra student? He says no. The Ramam Mipano says that Al Pi Kabbalah, the Satan was a kitrug. He said he wanted to take Rabbi Akiva's soil also. He said because Rabbi Akiva was a rotten teacher, that he wasn't a good enough example, that his students didn't respect each other. So he says Hashem said no. Sometimes you could have a perfect parent like Avraham, Yitzchak, but they could have terrible children like Esav and Yishmael. So therefore, they says part of the whole celebration, Al Pi Kabbalah of Lag BaOmer is that there was a kitrug, Midat Hadin, said not only should the 24,000 die, but Rabbi Akiva himself should die because he's the head of the whole academy, right? Hashem said no. we celebrate that Rabbi Kiva was alive, and that through Rabbi Kiva staying alive, he went and taught 5 new students, Rabbi Meir Balanes and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai and Rabbi Yosef and Rabbi Lazar ben Arach, right? And they were able to reinstitute Torah in Israel, in the nation, if not. But be that as it may, coming back to here, Tosfot reconciles both opinions. And Tosfot says, no, this is not a machloket. Everybody agrees that Mazal has a strong influence on how you live your life, right? In a loosely termed luck, but it's not just it's a heavenly luck, right? That has to do, like we said, the environment and the tools that Hashem gives you to do your mission in life. But Tosfot says, Al yedeh zechut gadol mishtane. If you do an extraordinarily great mitzvah, you can change it. Everybody would agree to that. Because it says in the Gemara Yevamot, he brings a proof from the Bavli, Talmud Bavli in Yevamot, in Perek HaCholetz, page 50, that Zacha Mosifin lo. Sometimes, if you have a zechut, you'll get an extra, longer life than you were destined to have originally when you were born. If you don't zechut, maybe you could go before your time, if you do go the opposite of doing good things. So, because the Gemara there in Yevamot says, En Mazal Yisrael. So, but Tosfot brings a second opinion. He says, but there is certain aspects. Now we're going to see from Rav Yitzchak Isaac Chaver, a grand student of the Gaon, Al Pi the Zohar, how you reconcile it. But Tosfot says there is certain things that are untouchable, which means there are certain aspects to your life that even if you do the most nuclear, extraordinarily atomic great mitzvah, grand, super deluxe Ali, first class, marvelous, grand mitzvah, you can't change. Now, an example of this second type of mazal that you can't really change is Rabbi Lazar ben Padat. One of the greatest rabbis that wrote the Talmud, was in the Talmudic time, was an extraordinary tzaddik. The Gemara in Tanit, page 25 says, was Rabbi Lazar ben Padat. And Rabbi Lazar ben Padat started saying, this is not fair. I don't have what to eat. I'm such a hasid, right? I'm such a perfectly righteous and pious person. So Hashem said, what? You want me to destroy the entire world, go back to the beginning of creation? Do you really want me to do that on your sake? And then maybe in this new world you'll have a good mazal? So he said, no, of course I don't want that. I don't want to put the reset button on the whole creation of all the galaxies and all the worlds. So we have to understand, Rav Dessler is a little bit bothered here. What exactly why can certain things? Tosfot clearly says that generally speaking, if you do extraordinarily great mitzvot, like prayer, and that extraordinary mitzvah is the most powerful one, is praying, right? If you put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in your prayer, like Leah did, right? Because Kabbalistically, really, Leah, let me give you a practical Torah example of that. The Ramchal clearly says that Kabbalistically, Leah was supposed to marry Esav. But she cried her eyes out, which, like Tosfot says, was an extraordinary big tefillah she did. Not some just random Joe Shmo tefillah like me and you do, but she cried her eyes out. And not only did she marry Yaakov before Rachel, which means that's a great manifestation and personification and a classic example of how you can change your mazal, right? Leah's mazal was to be with who? Esav. Like Tosfot said, she did an extraordinarily great tefillah. She cried her eyes out. That's why her eyes, the Torah says, were raw, were rakot, because she had cried her eyes out. But she was also zocher to be the mother of Mashiach, Yehuda, and all the Kohanim, Levi, right? So we see that tefillah has this, supernatural power. Now, Rav Dessler wants to explain that there's 2 types of mazal based on Kabbalah. There's called mazal elyon, the higher mazal, which is coming from Atik Yomin, those that know Kabbalah. It's in Keter, the 3 most highest sefirot, which we can't really understand. And then there's mazal tata'ah, in the lower olamot, that you can change. So but to speak it in a layman's term, he says like this, that, for example, we're living in a society where everybody wants to be wealthy. One of the most classical examples of mazal is somebody's mazal is, like the Evan Ezra says. Evan Ezra says, I have a terrible mazal to be poor. The day I went into the business to sell shrouds for the dead people, coffins, nobody died. So he says that you have to understand, for example, somebody's mazal is to be wealthy, somebody's mazal is to be poor. If it's a mazal, if it's the lower mazal, which means it's a tool, it's a test, right? Because you have to understand also, the main reason we were put here is to be tested every second, right? Are we going to go after light or darkness? Are we going to have to go after godliness, mitzvah, or listen to our Yetzer Hara, instant gratification, right? So he says, it depends what your mission is. If your mazal is just tools, right? Then you could change it. For sure you could change it like Leah did if you have an extraordinary hardcore mitzvah, right? Which is above average. Like you cry your heart out. But sometimes the whole reason you were Gilgul, which means your whole mission in life, and I heard a beautiful shir on this from a great Talmid Chacham. For example, based on what Reb Shimon Bar Yochai taught us, Gilgulim, let's say, for example, Mr. Reuben in his last life was a miser. He was the richest guy in town. He had billions of dollars. He let everybody, all the orphans and widows die. Hell will not do him justice. The only way is that he has to come back in this world and have a little bit dose of his own medicine, live 80, 90, 100 years. You understand? Which means like this. Why certain time one should not get frustrated, and this is very important shir to understand, because sometimes Rabbi Nachman of Breslev, based on the Zohar, and the Gra writes this, and all the Mekubalim write, the biggest Yetzer Hara in the time of Mashiach is depression, to give up, right? Don't pray anymore. Our fire, to serve Hashem with love, and that fire of our, like we said in the Masechet Shanim, of trying to be always glued to God, the Satan wants to make us the opposite. He wants to make us cold and make us somebody that is always complaining and doubting whether God loves us. Oh, God doesn't love me. So you have to understand, this Reuben, that last time around he was here, he abused his money, right? He did the opposite of sharing is caring. He totally let all the people die of starvation, and all the widows and homeless and orphan Jews die in the Siberian cold of Russia. You have to understand, he can't, if we change, he's not going to get to his tikkun, right? He's not going to get to his rectify. The whole reason he came, that he's rich or poor is not just tools, right? It's his whole mission, right? So the reason you came back here is to do that mission, you understand? So if you don't do that, it's going to be things. So let's give an example of the first type of mazal, the lower one. Mazal tata. Let's say, for example, somebody's mazal, he has the great zechut that he should be like Yaakov Avinu. He should be attached to Torah. So there's a concept, like Rav Ovadia Yosef you were speaking about before. Rav Ovadia Yosef, his son, writes that there was a time, my father had like 10 kids. We lived in like a one-bedroom apartment, and we didn't even have a kitchen, and my mother had to share her kitchen with like another 7 neighbors, and we had to share bathrooms with them. And they lived with really in a very meager situation. But the Chachamim say, Pirkei Avot, which I wanted to give a shir on, but we don't have enough time. This week's Pirkei Avot, chapter 4, Mishnah 9 says, whoever carries out the Torah from when he's poor, eventually he's going to be able to carry out the Torah and be committed to it from wealth. So definitely we read in the Shema always, V'natati matar artzachem be'ito. So he says in the footnotes here, for example, this person, if he's in an environment where everybody's poor, like Africa, he's like in a third world country. So he can choose to, live a poor lifestyle and be a Rebbe, right? Because his tachlit, his mazal, Hashem wanted to be like a Yaakov Avinu, right? You have like a person, Esav was meant to be like a warrior to destroy the enemies, you know that. Yaakov and Esav, going back to Mazal, a perfect example of this is Yaakov's mission was always to be the intellectual and the Torah scholar one. Esav was red and hairy because he had to be one that was like David HaMelech, would have to be a general and go be administrator, like a prime minister. But Rav Desser brings, sometimes a person through prayer could change his mazal. Now, what's his test if he's a poor Rebbe, right? That gets, he teaches children Aleph Bet. His test is that he can go live his life, and he has to be honest that he doesn't abuse the children, that he doesn't slack off, and he works. If he's getting paid 8 hours a day, he pays hours a day, right? He doesn't goof off. He works as a good employee for the yeshiva. But he can change his mazal. For example, if it's a lower mazal, he wants to be rich, he can move to America. Still, since he's under the mazal that he has to be connected to Torah, he could become a businessman. But then his test is, all the millions of dollars does he make? Does like Rechnitz, does he support yeshivas? Or does he become a lavish lifestyle? You understand? So that's an example he brings in the footnotes of that's how you could change your mazal, right? The first way you were still, you're connected to Torah. And the second way you're also connected to Torah. Just the first way you yourself were teaching children Torah. Now you're a supporter of Torah. You understand? But there's another type of thing you can't change. Like, for example, somebody has to be a Bal Yisurim. He has to have a lot of hardship, and he has to be weak and unhealthy and poor, because his tachlit is to show that even though Hashem keeps on punishing him, he still makes a Kiddush Hashem and he still loves Hashem, right? Such a person could say, hey, but he says, Gamze Letova, right? So his thing is like this. So, again, we're just going to end off the shir with this beautiful thing in Petach Sharim from Rabbi Yitzhak Chaver. And that is that it's brought down in the holy books, in the Zohar, that there is this mysterious world which we can't understand, called what? Atik Yomin. Atik Yomin is a very mysterious person. Because let me ask you, why should there be one tzaddik, like Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, right? That he has, he's super rich and famous in this world, and in the next world he's, right? Then you have another tzaddik that always has to have miserable. Now, I wanted to say something from the Grazal. The Gra says like this. There's a Gemara that says, why is there Sadik V'tovlo, Sadik V'ralo? So the Gemara answers, a Sadik ben Sadik, a Sadik that he was a Sadik, his father was a Sadik, he's going to have a good life, both in this world and the next world. Sadik ben Rasha is going to have a bad life. So the Grozal explains one of two ways. He says Sadik ben Sadik means what? Both in this reincarnation you were good, and last reincarnation you were good, right? So you're going to have a good life. But Sadik ben Rasha means that this body is a child of the previous soul, which means it's the same soul. Last time, like that Reuven guy, he let everybody die, and he can't change his mazel, which means you shouldn't think that Hashem is not fair and prayer doesn't work. This is why everybody share this with Yeshir. It's not like Hashem is unfaithful and your prayer is not working. Problem is, this issue is the whole reason you came back to this world. It's Mazal Elyon, which is Atik Yomin. It's in Keter. And it's a very mysterious world, because in that world, even if you go above Gilgulim, let's say pre-Gilgul, why should this tzaddik have to suffer for 100 years and that tzaddik have a beautiful life for 100 years? It doesn't make any sense. If you take out the Gilgulim factor, right? That's what Hashem told Rabbi Lazar ben Padan. You want me to press the reset button? That we don't know. See, that's above our pay grade. Then why some opinions, when it says it's elu ve'elu divrei Elokeinu, that's why it says yesh mazal Yisrael. That we say en mazal Yisrael is in chesed gevurah, the 7 lower worlds, where like Tosfot says, if you for sure like Leah and many other examples, if you do extraordinary good mitzvot, or you go to galut, meshane makom, meshane masal, which is also very difficult. Like I had to, you have to move 5,000 svarim and repack them, and your back breaks, right? Because of that hardship, you get a new thing. But something that's very important, and just to end the shir off, is if you can't figure out why, for example, somebody, he fasted 40 days, 40 nights, he said Nishmat Kol Chai, and he did like 500 million times what it says in the Ben Ish Chai's book to do tikkunim, right? And still, chas v'shalom, this person should not get cold. His love and fear and connection to God he shouldn't lose faith, right? Because that's all the satan, that's a malak that wants to make you cold. You have to realize it's probably, we're not, but based on the Zohar, it's probably Mazal Elyon, and this is what your tikkun is. So, also, there's a Gemara in Chagiga, Daf Yud Aleph, which says, that world of Atik Yomin, it's above our pay grade. If you go there and try to understand that world, your mind explodes and you go crazy, and that's whole Shabtai Svi, right? That the Ashkenazim don't like people to learn, right? You have to realize that, unfortunately, B'Avanotena Rabim, we don't have Nevi'im anymore, right? We don't have Baaleh. Some things we just have to accept that it's the vitamin B. It's this bitachon. You have to trust that Hashem knows what He's doing, right? Yeah. So, on the other hand, we hope that everybody always has a good mazal, and the greatest mazal we could bless everybody with is that mazal elyon, that you, like a bulldozer, you never get cold, you always have that fire of Torah burning in your soul, that you do your tikkun, you do your mission, because guess what? If you don't do that mission, by hook or by crook, you're going to have to do that mission. And I'll end with what Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi says, because we're dealing with Kabbalah, it's Lag BaOmer. He says, Kol Yisrael yesh lahem chelek le'olam haba sheneimar va'amech kulam sadiqim le'olam yishu aretz. So we say, every time we read Pirkei Avot, we say the Mishnah and Sanhedrin, that all the Jews are righteous. But he says, what do you mean? Bera'ayol en, we see that there's many evil Jews. He says it must be that there's Gilgul. If this time he's not a tzaddik, don't worry, Hashem will recycle him. And in the next, eventually, through all the hundreds of times or dozens of times he comes into this world, by hook or by crook, his Father in heaven is going to make him pure gold, 24 karat gold. You understand? That's what it means, Kol Yisrael Hashem. So Mazal Tov means that Hashem should help us know ourselves, know our mission. That's the greatest blessing, and do our mission so we don't need to come back. And when all the Jews do all their mission, then that's when Mashiach comes. And that's why I just wanted to say, Rav Dessler makes something very clear. Everything that we talked about till now was about individuals. Klal Yisrael as a whole is definitely above Mazal. Right? Ani Hashem Be'itach Yishena, about Mashiach, that's a whole different level, because Knesset Yisrael, like we see in the Zohar, has a different belovedness and a different track, right? That's a different system. Everything we talked about is about individuals. Have a great day.